Greetings, everyone. It's so happy to have all of you here. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Jamie Ann. I'm the director of the James Renwick Alliance. We're an organization dedicated to American craft. So we really do that through connoisseurship, public appreciation, and educational events and programs like the one we have this weekend. So I'm going to be inviting Rebecca Ravenel to join us soon to talk to us a little bit about the Distinguished Artist Series, which this event is part of. And, you know, the JRA is a membership program, a membership organization, I should say. And so I hope that if you're interested in any of our programs or trips, other educational opportunities we have, you consider joining. So thank you all again for being here. And with that, Rebecca, I'm going to invite you onto the stage.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jamie Ann. I am Rebecca Ravenel, the chair of the JRA's Distinguished Artists Series. 4 times each year, we invite a notable craft artist to tell us more about their work and career in a Saturday demo and a Sunday lecture. We're very sorry we can't be with you all in person during this time, but the online format has given us the wonderful opportunity and flexibility to do events like this straight from an esteemed New York gallery. So Claire Oliver has run her eponymous gallery for almost 30 years. She represents several artists who are craft superstars and many others who are well on their way to that status. We're so happy to welcome Claire and 2 of her artists, Gio Swaby and Adebunmi Gbadebo, this afternoon to give us some insight into their unique work.
Thank you so much. For those of you who aren't familiar with my gallery, we are located in central Harlem on 135th and Adam Clayton Powell, which is basically 7th Avenue. So we're right in the heart of what was known as the Harlem Renaissance. And we occupy a 4-story brownstone. We represent and have represented for 29 years artists who are perhaps underrepresented. So we have always had 60 to 80% women in our gallery, and we have we strive to represent those artists of color, LGBTQ, and other underrepresented people. I'm very happy to have with me today 2 fabulous ladies who just happen to be our youngest artists in the gallery program. And I would like to start chatting with you about Gio Swaby's work. If it's possible, I don't see Gio. Is she, Jamie Ann, is she up?
Yeah, I'm
oh,
here.
There you are. Okay, now I see you. Hi. So you have your work behind you, which is fantastic, so people can get an idea. But let's start at the beginning, because fabric and sewing are not traditionally seen as mediums to express conceptual work, and your work is completely content-based. So tell me, what drew you to textiles to use as your medium of choice?
Well, it's always kind of felt like a natural part of my life. Like, my mother was a seamstress, so I grew up around fabric and thread all over my house all the time. So I already kind of had a connection with this medium, and I've always been about expressing things in a way that may be seen as kind of more non-traditional. But the mode of like textiles and quilting is so important because of the history it carries, right? It's like a mode of storytelling that's been with us for centuries. And because my work is so story-based and is so based in community, I thought that using textiles and quilting as a medium was extraordinarily like fitting to kind of bring across the ideas and the concepts that I have been thinking about.
I was just, when you were speaking, I was thinking, because you said you grew up with thread and sewing all around. Was the idea that this is also something utilitarian? So it's almost like it's something useful, right? Because a quilt would keep you warm, or if you're designing clothes, it's something that you need to wear. Did any of that sort of come into your decision-making process?
Yeah, of course. Like I'm thinking about like quilting being associated with ideas of domesticity and womanhood and being connected to those, and how like historically that's been seen as a lower form of creating and of art. And I don't see it that way at all. I see quilting and textiles as a that can combine like these, or kind of it can span across a range of modes of delivery. So I'm kind of wanting to connect with these ideas of womanhood and connect with these ideas of domesticity in my practice, as not something that should be seen as less, but something that should be highlighted and valued. And also thinking about the invisible work of being a woman every day, and especially being a Black woman, that is so embedded into that medium.
Did growing up in the Bahamas, I know you have a very close-knit family, your beautiful sisters, and you guys are real close. Did any of that influence your decision to become an artist? Or where do you sort of see yourself having begun that journey?
Well, that was definitely a journey. It was like, it started off as something that was kind of out of left field. I don't have any artists in my family or people that would be considered artists, but I saw my mother's work as art. I saw the sewing that she was doing as art, and she was such a naturally creative person. My father's was a mechanic, and I saw that as a kind of art as well. But for others in my family, that connection wasn't always made. So it was a bit like of I guess of a shock. I've always been the black sheep, so it was more like kind of expected for me to go a different route. But
the rebel.
I definitely started to feel like that. Like that level of support of being like, if this makes you happy, I want you to do what makes you happy. And you know, having stayed with it for years, and they could see my real commitment to my practice. Like I feel like that close relationship with them has definitely helped me to foster a practice that's based in love, and that's based in community and caring for one another.
Do you remember a specific moment? Did you have an aha moment where your pathway forward and your process sort of clicked and you said, this is what I am meant to be doing?
Yes, like I remember like I got my first personal sewing machine. I was using my mom's sewing machine prior to this, and I got my first sewing machine in 2012. I had never experimented with quilting or any quilting techniques at all. And that machine was like a hybrid of a sewing machine, but it also could do like free motion quilting. And I had connected with a community of quilters just before I got that machine in the Bahamas. And when I started like going to like community events for quilting and also learning more about it, what I was trying to achieve and talk about in my practice connected so well with what was happening there, that it just kind of like was a light bulb moment. And I could see like that this was a path that I definitely needed to explore.
So your work aims to sort of redefine the often politicized Black body that is linked to violence and to trauma. We see joy and power and confidence and self-assuredness in your work. I really feel like you choose joy when you're making your work. Can you speak a little bit about that decision?
Yes. So that's a very like important and specific decision that I make in thinking about healing versus pain and how we can talk about trauma in a way that's through the lens of healing. And that's what I want to do with my practice. That's what I hope to do. So a lot of my work is addressing these very difficult conversations, and it is thinking about trauma, but it's through looking through that lens of healing. And I see my practice as a celebration, as a depiction of joy. And for me, that's like a form of resistance, being a Black woman and being joyful, and also connecting with other Black women and sparking that joy between us. So that's such an important aspect of my practice.
So this piece and this series, Another Side to Me, is all just thread. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to start this with all of the threads that you leave hanging? I mean, that's very intentional. And what it is you're talking about with this series of work.
So this in this series, this was the first time that I was experimenting with actually showing the reverse side of this quilting or embroidered piece. It's the underside that's usually not visible. People don't share it. They want to show the side that is polished, perfect, and pristine. So in this series, I'm creating a moment of vulnerability that I'm sharing with the viewer. And the title kind of reflects that process of reversing and also like flipping the piece over, but it also talks about the multiple ways of being in which Blackness can exist, and seeing not just a single story of Blackness, but being able to see individual stories and experiences from multiple walks of life.
When I look at these, I draw a couple inferences. I love the fact that you leave everything sort of messy and hanging, because I feel life is messy, right? Not perfect. And like you were talking about with the vulnerabilities, but I also like that is sort of like an unfinished story, because these women, their stories are not finished, right? So you're leaving these a little bit up to the viewer, and maybe that will draw them in to the work. But your figures are like very stylish, and clothes, I mean, they play a major role in the portrayal of these women that you're doing. So you see, I mean, they're very confident and stylish in what they're wearing. And the women are always staring out at us. They're always confronting us. Is that intentional? And can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, it certainly is intentional. The fashion aspect of it, the piece that we just saw is titled Going Out Clothes. I'm from the Bahamas, and that's like a saying there. Put on your going out clothes versus your yard clothes that you would wear at home. It's like your good clothes, something that you feel empowered in, something that you feel really great in. So wanting to kind of show that aspect of empowerment and also capture a moment of joy and a moment of feeling completely just so satisfied and so much in love with who you are. So that's what that kind of work is about for me. Just navigating that space. And then the idea of looking out, I was inspired and thinking about this when I was thinking through bell hooks and her writing about the oppositional gaze, and that the idea that there is power in looking and that there's power in looking back. And for me, it's about these figures displaying their agency and activating their power through looking.
You mentioned bell hooks, the nom de plume, for those of you who aren't familiar, of Gloria Jean Watkins. And if you Google the name, what's I find very interesting is that she wants the name all in lowercase, which as a feminist, I think is very interesting because it keeps your focus away from looking at that and more looking directly at the work, which I think also is important to you and what you're doing as well. But going back in this series, which is entitled "My Hands Are Clean," you told me the story of how you came up with this title, and I'd love you to share that if you would.
So this work came about from my experience of living in, when I moved to Vancouver, Canada from the Bahamas. I like Vancouver there's not a high population of Black people there. And, you know, most of the time I was the only Black person in the room, or if I was taking the bus, and I would be the only Black person in many spaces. And I was just thinking through that shift of how that has affected me and how my experiences around that. And one thing that really stuck out to me was just this fascination with my appearance, especially my hair. I had a few instances in which many Black women have previously talked about and shared their own experiences about people reaching out to touch their hair in public spaces, like total strangers sometimes, actually most of the time total strangers. And I had a response to that of being like, you know, don't like, not wanting them to get into my personal space. And when I kind of expressed that need of not being touched or not wanting to interact in that way, their response sometimes would be like, oh, my hands are clean, you don't have to worry about that. As if that was the main issue.
Not the invasion of your personal space.
Exactly. So I'm thinking of like two meanings of that, like physically, like, you know, my hands are clean, like physically clean, but also thinking of you know, washing your hands, of the responsibility of what that interaction means, and wanting to simplify it to just being something friendly when it could range into something that's much more harmful.
Exactly. If you could click back one, I think, to the differentiator. So this is so this is a diptych, which I think is a good piece I think what you have behind you, to speak about. Your work talks about the intersection of womanhood and Blackness, and you talk about that a lot. Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Yes, so when I think about the intersections of womanhood and Blackness, like I'm thinking about an intersectional approach to understanding many experiences of womanhood that include also queerness and transness, and something that and I'm also talking about how those identities can overlap with Blackness. I'm exploring like the similarities of our experiences of being a part of this identity, and also the uniqueness and complexities of it. And so much of that is about the relationships we form with one another, and thinking about how we are connected through our ancestry as well, and thinking through those ideas of like togetherness and connectivity.
And where do you see your work fitting sort of in the larger story of the African diaspora?
I think I am fitting into many of the beautiful voices of other Black women that we're hearing talking about their experiences in a way that has so much honesty. There's so much truth to it. And I'm joining into the chorus of those voices of wanting to connect with one another, wanting to bring our own stories told by us and for us to the foreground rather than things that have been told about us. I'm adding to the voices that have been reclaiming our narratives and wanting to create a space for us to heal and a space for us to learn more about ourselves and our identities.
Jamie, and if you could skip up to number 9 on the slides. Great. So you're working right now for your first solo exhibition in the gallery, Gio, which we are so excited about. We can't wait. I know it's crunch time, and you're getting close to the end. We were talking earlier before we started the Zoom about, I've been doing this 29, almost 30 years now, and there is no such thing as an artist that's early. It doesn't exist. So as we get closer and closer to the end, every hour becomes precious. But I wanted to talk about a couple of things that these new works that I've discovered, and they're all life scale. So what you're looking at here, we're looking at something that's roughly 38 inches across, is 7 feet. The canvas itself is 7 feet tall. So this woman is confronting you. She is life scale. What do you feel like you see the story that's coming together through this new body of work that's going to make up the exhibition, Both Sides of the Sun?
I see a story of, first of all, I guess at the basis of it is, as I've been saying, connection. I see my work as the majority of my work being visiting. So actually having conversations with the women that I am depicting, so much of them are my friends and people that I know very well. And at the basis of my work is that solidifying that beautiful connection that we have with one another. It's about that aspect of sharing our experiences and talking through that, and offering support and offering and holding space for one another. And these works are like a tribute to that, the tribute to the emotional work that we've done with one another. And I kind of see them as like almost like a residue of the work that's happened in kind of like understanding more about one another and fostering these connections in my life and in their lives. And that aspect of the sun coming in, the sun is an important part of my identity as a Bahamian. The yellow on our flag is representative of the sun, and it's present with us every day. Pretty much it's like every single day of the year, we don't go without seeing the sun. And I thought of the sun as like a connector, as a connector between me being in Toronto and the women that I have depicted in these pieces being in the Bahamas, and how, although we're separated, it's still the same sun and we both can feel the warmth from it. So I thought that would be like a really great way to think about this show, as a way to connect, even though it's much more difficult right now to do that.
And where does I know both sides of the sun is sort of a hybrid of a part of a poem. And where does that come from?
So the full quote is to be loved is, this may be a bit of a paraphrase, but the full quote is to be loved is to feel the warmth of the sun from both sides. And because I'm thinking of my work and the basis of it as being love, and thinking of love as a tool of liberation, I thought that using that quote would, or kind of rephrasing that quote to think about the sun and its connection to love would be so fitting to explore how all of us have come together to kind of think about love in maybe like a non-traditional way, like love as support, and how certain acts, like even acts of that may seem small, can be a big way to show that you to show your care and your love for someone.
And just one last question, what is your greatest aspiration? What do you hope to be able to convey to people that people will take away after viewing your work?
The biggest joy, I would say, like for me, and one of the things that I hope the takeaway is from my work, when I have that experience of seeing other Black women see my work and to see themselves represented in this way, it's that connection, and just seeing the way that the effect is it's potent, it's so strong. It's like almost something that can become like physical. And that for me is a huge part of it, to be sure that my work is accessible in a way that the people that I am thinking about and making the work for have access to it, and they can perhaps on multiple levels, but just wanting to make sure that that moment of realization and that moment of joy is a major aspect of what I'm trying to do with my practice. And I would also think about wanting to think about the work that I'm making as like textile work and as like a derivative of quilting, to be elevated as fine art, as something that can span a range of making. And yeah, I would say that those are the major things that I kind of hope for.
Well, so far, so good. I have to say, when people come in and look at your work, one of the things that gives me great joy, of course, being in Harlem, it's a completely different experience in that the neighborhood comes in and the neighborhood is interested in what we're doing, as opposed to when we were in Chelsea before, where it was just really like artaholics that were coming. but now it's everybody from every walk of life, from everybody from the mailman to whoever. And when the children come, this is my favorite thing, because they look and they see someone who looks like them in the work, and then they start to react with their parents about the work and what they see. And of course, children have no preconceived notions and they have no boundaries. So some of the most interesting and fresh thinking comes from these little babies' mouths, when they talk about what they see in the work. So I think you're succeeding. You're doing what you're meant to do.
Exactly. I was thinking, like, I have my nieces and nephews too. I have 7 of them. There's a lot. And I just think of them when I'm making this work and kind of wanting them to see this and to feel empowered by it as well. So that's also like a big aspect of me as a figure that people in my family look up to. It's like it feels like a really big responsibility, and I feel like my practice helps me to kind of shoulder some of that responsibility.
Oh, thank you. That's amazing. Thank you, Gio. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate your time and your explanations on everything. I hope everybody is excited about the work as I am. I would like to now introduce our second artist. And if everyone can also give her a belated happy birthday, because she just turned 29 last week, Adebunmi Gbadebo. There she is.
Let me
Hey,
unmute. Hi.
hey, and so everybody knows she goes by Boomy, and so I'm going to address her as such. So I want to start when we first met and tell everybody that that Boomy was Bisa Butler's assistant when I met her. And so for the first 2 years or so that I knew Boomy, she was at Bisa's studio, and I just found her to be one of these people who just had a dead-on eye. Everything that she mentioned about the work was spot on, and she was such a hardworking person. And but I never really thought about her as a fine artist herself until Bisa said to me, "Get over to Boomy's studio and look at that work, because that girl's going places." And I went over and looked, and bought like 6 pieces for myself from your studio. But so tell me, when you were in college, you decided to break all the rules of the artistic canon and create work that was from new materials, nothing that the old masters did, and you wanted to challenge like the rules themselves. So tell us a little bit about that process and how you came to what your chosen medium is.
Yeah, so I studied fine arts at the School of Visual Arts in New York, and you know, as a requirement, you take these art history classes. So this was actually the second semester of art history. So at this point, we learned maybe 500 years of the canon, and there wasn't a single representation of anyone who looked like me, either represented in the work or as the master who created the work. And the first time in this art history class, a figure I saw, a Black figure, was in the painting Olympia. So I like, this is like my kind of beginning story, Genesis story. So, you know, the Olympia, the painting by Edward Manet, comes up on our screen, and my professor introduces this painting as radical and controversial when it was made. And I was like, it has to be because of this Black figure, because that's the only thing radically different from this painting and the ones before. And of course, like, my professor goes on to say, you know, talk about this painting was radical because Olympia, the reclining woman in this painting, was a prostitute. And he went on to describe the cat, the shoes that the white, you know, that this woman was wearing, the curtain in the background with more vigor and detail than the other prominent human being in this painting. And that moment did a lot for me. One, it showed how even when we are represented, that we could still be deemed invisible. And it also showed me, because I was learning about this painting within the context of this larger history of art history, and this history was told through this medium, which was painting, it became really apparent that not only is this history flawed, but the material painting is loaded with this history that has nothing to do with me. You know, like painting in general is historically is a material that has been used to kind of perpetuate um, the white male painters and what they have done. So it was literally after seeing that painting, I decided not only did I have, if I wanted to really root my work in this Black subjectivity, it not only had to come from the context and the subject, but it had to come from the material. And for me, like Black hair is so connected to us politically, culturally, socially, spiritually. And then it is us. It's literally our bodies. So I was like, yeah, this is gonna be my material. And that was like the beginning.
So you asked your community to contribute. This is actually hair that was contributed by the Black barbershops in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Tell us about how you sort of came about with that process.
Yeah, so when I decided that I wanted to use Black hair, and I specifically use human hair, because then it enters this element of DNA that is in all the works. So I went straight to social media and I put out like call for hair posts where I was asking people, and I started going to barbershops, and that's always the most stressful part of my process, like going into a barbershop and asking, can I have the hair that is in your garbage can? Um, but I started getting donations, and the first pieces that I made, you know, like prior to working with you, Claire, was just making these like sculptural hair pieces consisting of almost 100% human hair. And I got them from the barbershop. So now I call them like my partnerships, where barbers save like bags and bags of hair from the week, and I have like assistants, or I'll go in and collect them. And then people mail me hair. So I've gotten hair from as far as Nigeria and Morocco, and Minnesota, Pennsylvania, like all over the place now. So it's been really special to see so many people just feel so connected, or wanting to be a part of the work by giving up parts of their bodies.
Well, I know that Black hair holds a major significance in the greater African community. You talked about Nigeria, and I know when you went there, everybody said, no one's going to give you their hair. And does that whole having to reassure people that you're going to honor their hair, that because it is a part of their body, like how do you reassure them of your intent?
Yeah, so I think, because I mean, and like even Gio talked about it, like this idea of representation, but like I think what's interesting about like the fact that I'm collecting human hair is like when you go into like your gallery or a museum or art fair, people are seeing not a like it's not just a representation of themselves, it is them, you know? So like in these spaces, like or institutions that have historically may not have included us on their walls, or you know, in their programs, you know, my friend Brittany and her aunt Louisa and my sister and the little boy who just got his hair cut on Friday, you know, they are in these spaces, like literally them, you know, and then because what hair carries, their ancestry, their stories are kind of abstractly being are a part of these works. So I think that alone, and sometimes I have to communicate that, or sometimes people just understand like, oh yeah, like please put me in your work. Like I can't wait to see where it goes. So I think that alone just really connects people to wanting to do something so significant like donate their hair.
Well, I know DNA, they say, can live for 10,000 years, right? I mean, mummies, the
Yeah.
Egyptian mummies, they still can get the DNA from their hair. So if this is true, it is, you're really sort of honoring their ancestors, or, you know, it's a way to pay homage to them. And I sort of feel that that in and of itself, they would live on in that way, because it becomes almost like a portrait, right? Tell us a little bit about your journey to find your own lineage, your mother's lineage in South Carolina.
Yeah, so I guess when I started getting a lot of donations, sometimes people would donate their hair with a little note about their personal history or why they cut their hair. Or I was starting to get groups of families like sisters that would donate their hair together, or a mother and a child that would donate their hair together. And because I think a lot about how this material is ancestry and DNA, and it's a way that connects us to a land. You know, it like I could take a strand of your hair and tell you where in Africa or Europe or wherever you're from. um, I started thinking a lot about my ancestry, um, and at the same time my family on my mother's side was doing a lot of work, kind of bringing a lot of our family history to the forefront, so that like me, who's a young person in our family, knows that. And with my family and I both trying to just um, bring up this history, it took us to True Blue Plantation, which is in Fort Mott, South Carolina, which was the indigo and rice plantation. So True Blue got its name from the indigo that grew from that place, where my mother's side was enslaved for centuries. Um, so I just started, it became like, I guess that was like a turning point where, and like in this piece that's up now, before I started looking at True Blue, you know, I started doing a series where I would take hair and literally form it into sheets of paper. This idea that the paper has this kind of abstracted information, which is the DNA, and then this other physical, more representational information, which were these portraits of family that I was printing onto the sheet. So like you said, like this portrait or double portrait or double image. Um, and then when I started kind of doing more research about True Blue, it really started shifting my practice. And that's when, for the first time, color entered my work and other materials. Yeah.
So when you went down and you saw that the plantation was sort of known, True Blue was known for its indigo, that's when you introduced the blue color to the work. So this, what we're looking at here, is one of the first pieces that you did with the indigo. So it has human hair, paper that is made from the tree, the rice trees, and cotton linters and an indigo dye. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. And I guess some of the sheets even had denim. So like this sheet, there's like a kind of ashy blue that is denim. So yeah, for when I first started doing these blue sheets, there was no like images. It was just really an exploration of like this color and material. The cotton it being a way to signify the institution of slavery, but then the blue being symbolic of like the indigo that that grew from the space. And also as an artist, it became really kind of I don't want to say disturbing, but it's like just this interesting dynamic that a color so beautiful can have such a a violent history, you know?
And it's I mean, it's so deadly too. The average lifespan is 7 years,
Yeah,
right?
I
For a slave working with indigo.
yeah, I did research, like the process of cultivating indigo on these plantations was so brutal, um, that the life expectancy of an enslaved person was about 7 years. So this was like a very intense process. And through further research, I also learned that the enslavers would go specifically to these countries in West Africa that had this long history of working with indigo or rice. And they were paying a premium to um, snatch them from their land, um, send them through the Middle Passage. So because they had the knowledge, the expertise, the history of taking this land and creating these giant, rice and indigo empires. And even like I talked about like how blue, we don't think of it as like this color that has this violent history. And then also like rice, was grown from true blue plantation. I think of like that brand, what is it? What is the brand of rice? It's called like a Carolina Gold or something like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it comes from Carolina and Georgia
Carolina.
being these major rice plantations. At one point, rice in the color blue was worth more than gold.
Wow, that's amazing. When you were down there, you a lot of this knowledge that you've gained is due to your meeting your uncle, right? He's sort of, and he's trying to be sort of a custodian of the family history. Tell us about how that relationship blossomed.
Yeah, so I have an uncle. His name is Jack Lee Whitmore, and he's been doing a lot of work to so I went down to True Blue, I guess it was about a year and a half ago, like before the pandemic. And he's been doing a lot of work to preserve some of the spaces. The plantation is huge, but there's a section of the plantation which is True Blue Cemetery, which a lot of my ancestors are buried, which allowed us to stay connected to this land. So he did a lot of work where he actually got the cemetery marked as a historical marker. So it's a historical site recognized under, the U.S. And he's just been doing a lot of work to find a lot of history connected to True Blue, to make sure that our family is still connected. Because even after emancipation, my family continued to bury our loved ones in True Blue Cemetery. And then I've also been exploring True Blue plantation in Pawley Island, which is currently a golf club. So like this image up here is the clubhouse that is at hole 18. So in the late 70s, True Blue Plantation was transformed into what I call this other white space. And there's 18 holes where you could join the club and kind of leisurely golf on this land that has this very dark and history that's kind of just been glossed over with these 18 holes. So I started finding a lot of just documents like the clubhouse. And this is actually a rendering from the golf architect for his plans of what hole 18 would look like. So I started taking a lot of the golf architect's drawings. At the top corner, you could see like a little hint of the header of one of his renderings where it says True Blue Plantation, detailed grading and shaping plans, hole number 14. And I started kind of like tearing some of his renderings apart and silk screening them onto these sheets to kind of create this own, like a new kind of archive or documentation of what this land used to be and what it currently is.
And it's kind of, I mean, it's almost like you've made two separate histories, because in a way you're speaking to the erasure of
Mhm.
what the true meaning of that land, and what that, the pain and suffering that that land holds. They're trying to make it this romantic notion, with these sort of antebellum architecture, buildings, and everything that they're building there. And you're sort of speaking to that erasure by the fact that you're tearing these plans up and just showing a small bit of that. But at the same time, then you're also really calling out and giving voice to what was there before. So in a way, you're also sort of preserving what was there before. Yeah, so this one here, this is really very poignant. Tell us about the document that's on this one.
Yeah, so I think like just in general, my practice is rooted in like heavy research. So even trying to understand more about this True Blue Plantation that was a golf club, I just really luckily found another document. And I found this document by identifying who owned True Blue, like the enslaver's name, George Pauley. And I was able to find his will, because it was listed that he left a very detailed will. And when I found his will, I saw a list of 185 enslaved babies and adults, teenagers, elderly people that were listed on his will at $2,000 per person. And on the will are their names, their age, and the role that they played on the plantation. So it may say like Lily, 13, prime hand, and prime hand meant they were responsible for the primary work on the plantation.
So they would be valued, that these would be the people that you were talking about that would have been snatched, that had all of the expertise already, that would have been snatched from their homeland.
So you could see like prime hand, ditcher, seamstress, housemaid, at the bottom. And this, I dipped the will in indigo, so even the blue is kind of making some of this information kind of illegible and more abstracted. But in total, all of the 185 enslaved people were that three 3,700, sorry, $370,000 dollars for 185 people. So I mean, it was really disturbing to find that information, but then there was kind of this real excitement around, because I mean, this land is a golf club. So to find names of the people who worked this land, I felt was just a really tremendous thing, because it was a way to bring their stories back into this history. And then I feel like I also do that by the hair is in the sheet. So like as you're looking at reading their names, like the actual surface of the sheet has other human bodies kind of scattered throughout the cotton and the denim and the rice paper.
The
So,
DNA, yeah.
so
And you
it's
can
like,
zoom in, you can see the little hair, each little hair that's been, yeah.
so it's kind of like my way of just bringing us back into this history that has erased us, that has overlooked us, that has just built over us. It's really, in a very literal way, bringing us into this narrative and history again. And then through the research and the, other methods, just bringing us back into this story.
If you could jump to number 27, Jimmy. I just want to touch on this. I know we're running out of time, but there's a little slave cabin that you have here. Tell us about the image that's on this particular piece.
Yeah, so for this sheet specifically, I got a lot of these documents from my uncle Jackie Whitmore, and at the top corner it was the last slave cabin that was on True Blue Plantation, and I learned that the second to last slave cabin um, was actually struck by lightning and caught on fire and burnt down. And then this one was washed away in a hurricane. I don't remember which one. So it was like, I was like, that's crazy that one was taken by fire and one was taken by water. And then on the side of that, the kind of text is another will from an enslaver of True Blue, where he talks about how he's passing down his gun and his humans and his land. So it was another kind of disturbing text, but I think it really speaks to how we think about like present day and kind of what's happening in the world. Like this wealth was passed down, like you know, like certain companies and how this country was built. This was like a legacy of wealth and resources that were passed down through generations. And there's people that really benefit from that, and there's people that have systemically been have no access to that. So I mean, even currently, when we look at the state we're in as a country, I mean, you could just trace
Trace it back. And you also
Blackness
mentioned when you were reading through the will that there was one will where the alcohol was worth more.
Yeah,
The bottles of wine were valued at more than a human life.
yeah.
Right? That's what you were telling me, which is just like, I mean, in so many ways, I think it can open our eyes to things that knowledge is power. So we need to have this knowledge so we can move forward. If we could just jump forward a little bit because we're running out of time, to slide 31 or 30 actually is cute. So here's Adebunmi, and when we were in Miami at the Untitled Art Fair, and this is a grid. So this would be like a wall of portraiture that because these are her ancestors and their DNA. And I bring this piece up. You can click through, Jamie. I bring this piece up because I want to let all of you know that these works are living in Washington, D.C. now, because these pieces have been acquired by the National African Museum of Art and by the National Museum of African American History and Culture. They split the series so that they can share or exhibit as they see. So you can see get the scale of the work, and you can see some of the pieces that we detailed there a little bit more.
And I like I'm glad you have these images, because like I like the grid allows me to, because each sheet has a bit of information. So in this grid form, it forces the viewer to look at every sheet, kind of slow down the viewing, and to understand this kind of broader story of what I'm trying to depict, you have to really just take each sheet in, and that was kind of like a method I like to play around with, just slowing the viewer down or really forcing you to look at us, to look at this history. To kind of breaking the sheets up in these little parts is kind of like my method of doing that.
And then the last slide just behind that. Yeah. So this is your most recent paperwork. And this is from the brand new series, which you've just, again, Bumi's process requires a lot of investigation and research. And tell us, just give us a quick little overview of this particular piece. This piece is much larger. So we're looking at about 24 inches across and about 5 feet tall.
No, it was 7 feet.
7 feet tall, 7 feet tall.
Yeah, it was my first, this was like my largest sheet I made. And it's from a new series that I'm calling Production. And I guess this was my first time kind of not just focusing on True Blue, but I focusing on at all kind of indigo plantations in the American South. So these were just archival images of the production of how the indigo was made. So you see some details of step by step how this kind of grueling process of indigo. There's some images of the actual indigo plant. And then I found a journal of one of the enslavers of a indigo plantation in Florida, where he listed step 1, cut the plant. Step 2, and when you read it, like I don't remember a lot of some of the details, but I remember like one was like you have to like stomp the leaves in a vat of water for 60 hours. I mean, it was crazy. Some of the
Oh my goodness.
so this sheet was just me exploring, I guess narrowing in on how the indigo is made. So this is from the Production series.
So just for my last question, which I asked Gio the same, what is it that you hope people take away? If you have to sort of put it in a nutshell, what is it that you hope that your work says to people that they can take away?
Yeah, I guess first, for the people who donate the work, that they feel that I really just represented them and honored them in a powerful way. And then the viewers who look at the work, that they just maybe, I guess, just stop and really think about these histories that seem so far away, but we're still very connected to it. I guess, and then because I'm like finding names of people who were connected, through the enslaved people, that just all these ancestors, I mean, not that they'll like be like, Boomer, you're doing a good job, but just that I just honor what they went through. So I guess the work that I'm doing is a way to honor the people that had to endure this history, honor the people that give the hair to me. And
it's almost like today everybody says, say her name, say his name. I mean, like just getting the word out there. And again, just knowledge is power. If people understand what's going on, that's the way we can fix things.
Yeah, and I guess the next time you see a color blue or something, or rice, to just think of it in a different context. I don't know. I feel like I'm still too young. I don't know what my legacy will be.
Well, thank you so much for your time and chatting with us. Do you want to take it away, Jimian?
Thank you all. I'm gonna invite Gio to turn her video back on. And we're gonna take some questions from the audience. So if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat box. I know Emily was answering a few as we went along. So I'm going to get us started. Sometimes I know people are a little shy to write their questions, and it takes a minute to write. So I'll forgive everyone. So Bumi, I'm going to ask you a question since we were just talking about your work. Do you tend to include hair from your family in works that are related to your family, or does that not matter? Is it kind of a shared history that you're looking at?
No, so the sheets that had images of people on it, I have included my hair and my family's hair. So I have a one sheet where I took my dad let me give him a haircut. I don't know why he would ever have me do that. But I took my dad's hair and made it into a sheet of paper. I printed my grandfather's image on my dad's hair, and then I sewed my brother's hair onto the surface. So it was like kind of this three generations of men that I come from. So like those earlier works, I have included my family. But now my brother has locks, so his hair, he's not getting haircuts. My dad's balding. I have a different hairstyle. So most of the hair now is just through donations of strangers or barbershops or salons.
Yeah, so we have one question from the audience about process. And the question is, do you have a vision of the work that you're kind of working from? Are you sketching first? Or is this something that you do as you go along? So maybe Gio, we can start with you.
Yeah, I definitely envision something first, but I like to leave a little bit of room for surprise in the work. So planning everything down to a T beforehand it removes some of the most interesting parts of the process for me when making, which is that idea of inviting some surprise or leaving some space for the universe to do a little bit of magic. So I do plan just to get a general idea, but while I'm working, I want to be guided by intuition. I want to be guided by the world around me. So I do leave some space where I can kind of play around.
Yeah. And Bumi, what would you say for yourself?
I don't start off with sketches. I guess like my starting point really is rooted in research. You know, like when I found those wills or the drawings from the architect or information that my uncle gave me, it really kind of grounds how I want to approach it, and also that history informs the materials that I use. So like using blue, using denim, using indigo, using cotton, all connects back to the context of the space. And like the bigger sheet was more difficult because it's just a larger surface. It was like 7 feet. So I guess I have a direct process in terms of the traditional kuching method of making paper, which is like this very formulaic process. But as I add the colors and the text or the images, that is very intuitive.
And so actually that's a great segue into another question that I got earlier on, which was for you, Gio, about your selection of fabrics and like the bright colors and how that plays into your overall concept.
Like being from the Caribbean, color is a part of our lives. It's like every day we're just a bright people, you know, especially the Bahamas. Like I draw a lot of inspiration from a festival in the Bahamas called Junkanoo that happens in twice a year during the winter time. And it's all like it's like a paper mache and cardboard, lots of like crepe paper. It's all super brightly colored and beautiful. How the colors are layered and put together. So I kind of draw inspiration from like my upbringing of being around that environment, selecting my fabrics based on that. And it's also just a lot of time spent like visiting with the fabrics. I go to like fabric stores all the time and like walk around for a really long time and just kind of, I want to have that moment of something like speaking to me and like calling to me. And sometimes I don't know even why I want to use this fabric at that moment, but I take it and I get it at that time. And then maybe even like a year or like a few months later, or sometimes the next day, I recognize what the connection is, and then I can start to like build from there.
Great. And Caroline Kipp is asking you, Bumi, can you talk a little bit about your new venture into clay, which we were talking about a little bit before.
Yeah, so I'm currently, like right now, I'm in Pennsylvania at the Clay Studio in Philadelphia. And how this started, when I went to True Blue Plantation, I was mesmerized by the bright red dirt that is everywhere, which all these crops grew from. And just, being an artist and curious, I started playing in the dirt and I poured some water in it and it became very malleable. And I went to like a Dollar General, got a bunch of crates and dug up a lot of this dirt and brought it back to my studio. And when Claire came to the studio, I was just telling her like how I was thinking about creating a new series from the plantation in which I'm exploring. And she connected me to the Clay Studio, and for the next several months, I'll be taking the dirt, the red clay, and turning it into ceramic sculpture. And it's been just so it's a new material, but it's still connected to this history that I've been exploring for like the last year and a half. And I don't know, it's really powerful to think that this is the very land that my ancestors are buried in and that they worked on. And there's been like periods in my like just in the studio where I'm like, what am I gonna make? Because I'm not a ceramicist, but I think there's a really interesting, powerful like thing that like I have the option to decide what I make from this dirt, where my ancestors didn't have that decision. They were forced to do something, and now I have like this power and this decision to kind of create whatever I want from it. So it's been very interesting. I have a lot of stained red clothes, but yeah, I'll be there till August, kind of seeing what I can make from this red dirt.
Yeah. Well, I love that both of you were talking about identity, and one, when you're talking about it through history, and Gio, you're really talking about it through joy and the shared beauty. I'm gonna pause for a moment, and I'm actually gonna ask some questions of you, Claire, if that's okay, about the gallery, because I think it's so wonderful that you have both of these artists and you have such an amazing roster, many of which our members know. And anyone who's paying attention to the craft field and the craft market, really give praise to your gallery for what you've been able to do for artists who are not working in the traditional, paint on canvas mediums. So when you were talking about representing underrepresented artists, is that also including artists of different mediums, or was that inspiration completely different?
Real, yeah, no, that really didn't come into play. I guess the way we looked at it, my husband and I are both huge collectors, and when we met, we both had collections of our own, and we sort of both had the same idea that it doesn't matter what the medium is, if the artist's chosen medium is the best way to express what it is that they're trying to say. So I guess for me, whether it's, a mosaic or stained glass or a weaving or textile or handmade paper, whatever it is that the best way to get your message across? Mm-hmm. And since the beginning of the gallery, we've been very invested in not beating people over the head with a political message, but having something important to say. So I feel the best way is that we can seduce them with beautiful, amazingly well-made, awe-inspiring work. And once we have brought them in, then we can speak to the bigger issues and the bigger if it's climate change or whatever it is that the artist is interested in, that's a bigger issue, that's something, social justice, that we need to address. And we can address it in such a way that they don't feel that there's something that they are affronted by. But if you look back in history, we're not doing anything new, really. This has been done since, art began. It's just sort of been maybe subverted. But a lot of these artists that have come down through time, they had a political message and they had something important to say. And hopefully now people will start listening.
Yeah, well, I think that's so obvious in both Bumi and Gio's work, because I think both of your works, the medium is a huge part of what you're trying to express. So I think, Claire, obviously kudos to you because you're doing an amazing job. And I do have one other question kind of in what you're talking about. So not pushing a political message, but I wonder if the work that you're doing is going to like really change the future of the field and going to change these history books where Bumi is looking back at this and saying, there's no representation. Well, you're representing people, you're putting it in museum, you're putting work in museums, you're putting work in private collections. And I wonder how you see your role in doing that, because, this could have a big effect, right? Like if all of us together are working on causes we care about, we can make this change. And I think your role is very important in getting things.
Thank you for noticing. That's exactly what we're all about. I have always said one person can change the world. If you look at history, it's true. And I'm a doer, not a talker. So I always feel like the current show we have up right now is a charity event for the local food bank here. All of you listening, go and look. All of the profits from the show are going to the food pantry here in Harlem, which has been devastated by COVID. And we're making a huge difference. We're making a huge difference. And people are coming in that didn't know and saying, well, I can't afford to buy a piece of art, but you know what? I can go online and I can give them $10. I can, donate $10 to the food bank. I can, walk down the street and see if they need help passing out. So I feel that, and this is just like a random thing because it's what's going on right now, but the bigger picture is one person can make a difference. And I do feel that all of the connections that I've made over the years, not just with the Smithsonian, but with all the museums around the world, they do see that there is a hole in their collections, and that this work that we're doing is very relevant and important, and it can help sort of fill the canon, fill the holes in the canon.
Yeah, and I know the James Renwick Alliance is working on supporting that. So Bumi and Gio, Claire, we thank you so much. I'm going to invite Rebecca back on to give a final farewell, but we cannot give enough praise. This was absolutely wonderful. So thank you all so much.
Yeah,
thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, wow. I want to add my thanks. Claire, your enthusiasm for and your care for your artists really comes through, and your curiosity and your connection in the questions that you asked, and your obviously your deep knowledge of what they're trying to say was really appreciated in those conversations. And Bumi and Gio, wow, what really powerful and profound things you're saying and manifesting in such beautiful works. I think all of us really were riveted and really learned something today. And we hope to see you guys all over the place in the future. Your work really warrants it. So thank you for that. I want to remind people that tomorrow we do have an artist talk by Bisa Butler at 2:00. And if you have not signed up for that, you can go to jra.org and find the Distinguished Artist Series button and register, and you'll get a link. And also, if you want to learn a little bit more about Bisa's technique, she'll be talking a lot about her career and some about her technique, but there are on Claire Oliver's website, which you should all go to find out more about Bumi and Gio and some of the other artists, you'll also see some videos by Bisa that do talk about her technique. So just to prep you for tomorrow, if you want to do that. And we thank everybody again. This was really fascinating, and appreciate everybody's presence here today. So with that, we will say goodbye and hope
Thanks,
to see
everybody.
you again.
Bye-bye.
Bye.